My name is John Higgins and I'm a brain surgeon. It's not rocket science, but I prefer to do comic art as a living. I draw and paint and tell stories. It's one of the things I enjoy most in life. You know, the French have a saying, which is if you have a job you love, you never work a day in your life. So I've never dared to work a day in my life. Science fiction is my joy. That's the whole reason I got into comics in particular. When I left art college, I wanted to be I wanted to be a book cover artist for science fiction magazines and books. And SF publications in the mid-1970s is when I left art college. It was a real, that's an occupation. People were doing record covers for Yes. It's like one of my favourite artists used to do record covers for Yes, the group, the super group. Actually, better not talk about music from the 70s because it'll go over all your viewers' heads, really, I suppose. But anyway, in that particular time of when I started my career, you could actually make a living painting book covers for science fiction publishers. And that's what I wanted to do when I left college. And the great thing for me about science fiction is the fact that, one, I'm a fan of it, but also you can one week be doing a monster or a hard work, rocket ships, or you can be doing aliens. And I like the idea of like doing something that's like has different cultural emphasis visually. So you can do lots of things with science fiction, as you know. It's like Brave New World, 1984. You can do things that like you can't do in mainstream media, even if you call it satire. So yeah, I wanted to be a science fiction book cover illustrator. But when I started coming out to be freelance, 2000 AD had just started, which is the first British SF specific title comic book. And I just thought this is another outlet for my work. But it actually became my career in the end. The very first thing I did, which is probably a year or two after I left art college, was a cover for 2000 AD in 1977. And at that stage, that was probably one of the very few things I'd been paid for. And then I didn't do a lot of work with them for a very long time, till mid-80s, but I was doing lots of other stuff. I was doing book covers and stuff. But I really loved the idea of like doing storytelling. I am a storyteller. That's what I do predominantly. Even if I'm collaborating with a writer, my job is to tell the story that the writer is directing me through. But the fact is, like, even my writers tell me when I email them, I can't do punctuation to save my life. If you gave me a bucket of punctuation, I would just throw it at the wall of type, and hopefully some of the punctuation would stick. So I can never write a story, but I can draw a story. And that's what I get the opportunity to do as a science fiction comic artist. But, I do lots of other things. I do horror comics. I haven't done many superhero stuff, as much as I love superhero, because that's like touches on science fiction. But that's what I do for a living. Yeah, what I'm most proud of from my career, and I've done lots of stuff I'm really happy with and very, very proud of. I've worked on lots of major characters, 2000 AD and Rebellion. They did do Judge Dredd. That is still my favourite character. I've done Batman for DC Comics, and that comes a close second to my favourite character. But my most personal and favourite character is a character called Razorjack. And that was self-published I first did the first issue in 1999, and it's subsequently taken up by other companies. So I'm actually still working on it intermittently throughout my career, but probably Razorjack, of all the characters I work on, is my most personal, most favourite character. The best advice I could give myself, if I could go back 20, 30, 40, 50 years, to give an advice to my younger self would be to not take things too seriously in the first 10, 15, 20 years of your career. I tend not to take things too seriously, even now. I mean, life is a laugh, and then you die. And if you have a good laugh, you die happy. The character that I would most like to sleep with, the character I would most like to draw and sleep with. No, the character I most like to draw. Right, the character I would most like to draw would be Wonder Woman, and the character I would most like to sleep with would probably be. No, I got that the wrong way around. The character I would most like to sleep with. No, I'm not going to sleep with any characters because they're all fictional. Right, so forget that. The character I would most like to draw would be Judge Dredd, because I'm still drawing Judge Dredd now. Judge Dredd is one of my favourite characters. And the fact that I started doing stuff for 2000 AD in 1977, as I said earlier, and they still employ me now, 40 extra years later. I can't believe it. And I still love this character. And the great thing about this character is the editors trust the artist. The writer who created the character, the last job I did was actually with John Wagner, who co-created Judge Dredd. And it was just so much fun. And he's still completely and utterly off the wall. The future he creates is completely and utterly wild and mad. You really have to check it out. So that was in 2000 AD, just the last couple of months. So I think it's really weird. The first time I considered myself to be a professional comic artist, storyteller, was probably when I woke up 8 hours ago, 12 hours ago. You never believe it. I don't know what you guys are like, but it's like being professionals and doing what you do that you love. You keep thinking, it's that imposter syndrome. You keep thinking someone's going to discover me one day and going to tell me you've been cheating all these years. And for me, sort of like to be invited to something like Meanwhile has been great fun, because and plus the fact we meet fans that we've known for years, we meet new fans, and it's great to see the people who've been wandering around the last couple of hours, sort of, the young families, which has been great. And it's like it's just makes you realise maybe I can do this for a living. And the fact that you can pay the bills at the end of the month, it makes you realise, I'm doing this for money. I'm either a prostitute or I'm a comic artist, one of the two. I think I'm a comic artist. It's such a loaded question, asking someone who's been employed sometimes on the behest of the writer. But as an artist, I think what we try and do is sort of like butter up the writer and sort of like say they're the best looking person in the cattle pen, but then if we see a bigger bull, we'll go to that writer. And we tend to find that you're not going to show this to writers, are you? Anyway, no, seriously, it's like a lot of my artist friends are going to tell me off, because I actually think the writer is the most important aspect of what I do in my life as a career. And some of the best people, my best friends, are writers. And the great thing about like having a best friend who's a writer is the fact that when we socialise, we never stop talking about things we enjoy, and we enjoy collaborating. So the great thing about like having writers as friends is it's almost like you can go into a crowd of people and sort of like say, okay, I'm not a complete nerd. That guy's a nerd. He's a writer. So the great thing about having a writer is you can place the blame on them if anything goes wrong, and if anything goes right, it's the artist. So yeah, the artist is the most important thing in a collaboration. To talk about Marvel and DC, the competitors, and the great thing about Marvel or DC, which the great thing is it's like tribes. Who would you pick? Which is your tribe? And you do tend to find sort of like a lot of fans will actually sort of like whatever they read predominantly as young fans, if they have the fortune to become a creator, writer, artist, colorist, letterer, or whatever, or even editor, they all started as fans, to actually work for one or the other of the people who supplied you with your dreams or nightmares. It's just brilliant. But for me personally, it would always be DC. I mean, I've always found sort of like there's something interesting about both companies, but it's like there's something about Marvel that seems to be a bit more not so serious. And I'm not saying entertainment should be serious, but there's something for me that there's depth to what DC have always tried to do. And whenever I've worked for DC, whatever project I've done with DC, they've always had something that's like grips me. It's first and foremost, it's the writing. I can trust the writing. Because they approach storytelling completely differently. There's a Marvel way of doing things and a DC way of doing things. The Marvel way is like they do a script that's not broken down. They'll give that to the artist. The artist then breaks down the story into panels, and then the writer goes back in and writes dialogue and additional exposition. With DC, they give you a full script. So the editor has commissioned the writer to do the story, the writer's written the story, the editor will edit it, and then they will change and chop and fit it in with any other storylines going on. So I, as the artist, will end up getting a fully written script that gives you breakdown of like panels and text, expressions. So it's like you always know when you're writing something that's like comes from DC. It started out as an idea. The writer's written the story. He knows the way it's going. Whereas, to a certain extent, when you read stuff from Marvel, you tend to think, wow, it's stunningly beautiful. The breakdowns are just gorgeous. The composition, this like the way they presented the characters is just beautiful. And to a certain extent, you can say 90% of that is the artist projecting what he wants to do. And to a certain extent, that gives more power to the artist. So actually, I've taught myself into deciding this Marvel I like best, not DC. My creative process at home, it really every day starts the same way, and it's a habit I wish I could break, and I really can't. And I get up and do exactly the same thing more or less every single day. And it's the blank page syndrome. When you're writing a script, or when the cameraman is like doing storyboards, you're visualizing it, and to a certain point, you're starting with nothing. And as a comic artist, that's every scene, every day. I'm starting with a blank page. So there's a process I have to go through, and it really is weird, and I hate it because I waste so much time. So I just end up going into the studio, whatever, 6:30 in the morning, switch everything on. Unfortunately, nowadays there's lots of things you can do digitally, and I traditionally like, drawing and getting black pen over my fingers, which, I've still got some on today, which is great. I've done traditional art today, which is brilliant. But the digital, you switch on the computer, and then there's a process where everything starts warming up, then you read the script, and then you start making marks on paper. But it really can take 2 or 3 hours before anything realistic gets done. And it's so frustrating because I have to go through the same process every single day. I remember there's this great artist called Gil Kane, and there's a couple of other ways of sort of like people loosening the hand, but Gil Kane used to come in and literally spend an hour drawing the characters he was going to be drawing later on in the day. And he used to spend an hour before he was paid to do anything, just drawing and drawing and drawing. And that's more or less what I do. I will draw, I will write, I will select colour, I will do something else. But I have to do the same bloody process every single day. And I love it.